The man who lived in her attic. It started with a noise, just a small muffled sound, barely noticeable, almost dismissible. A soft creak from the ceiling, like old wood settling. Jennifer barely gave it a thought. After all, she lived alone, in a quiet suburban home. Her world was peaceful, predictable, safe. Or so she thought. The first time she noticed something strange was on a Tuesday morning. The milk carton was sitting on the counter. She didn't remember leaving it there. She always put things back. She was that type of person, a creature of habit. But maybe she was tired. Maybe she forgot. That's what she told herself. The next night, the light in the hallway was on. Bright, unmistakable. She was sure she had turned it off before bed. Still, it was easier to assume she was being forgetful than to consider anything sinister. After all, she lived in a safe neighborhood, with quiet neighbors, with trimmed lawns and wind chimes. This wasn't the place where horror stories happened. But they do. They always do. And they always start small. Jennifer began to notice things missing, or moved. Nothing major, just off. A spoon in the wrong drawer. The bathroom mirror slightly tilted. She started to feel like someone had been in her house, and yet the doors were always locked. The windows sealed, no signs of a break-in. Nothing stolen, nothing damaged. It was just subtle, disturbingly subtle, enough to make her doubt her own memory, her own sanity. At night, she began hearing noises, footsteps, soft, above her ceiling. She told herself it was pipes or squirrels, but there was something about the rhythm, the way it moved. Pipes didn't walk. Squirrels didn't pace. Something was in her attic. She climbed up there once. Just once. During the day. Holding a broom as if it could protect her. There was nothing. Or at least nothing she could see. Just insulation. Dust. The usual forgotten. Christmas boxes, still she felt it. That prickling sensation. Like she was being watched. Like she wasn't alone. Jennifer installed a camera in her kitchen. Not because she truly believed something was happening, but because she needed proof. Of something. Anything. What the footage revealed was something no one is ever prepared to see. In the dead of night, a man climbed down from the attic. Gaunt, barefoot, eyes wide and hollow. He moved like a shadow. Quiet. Controlled. He opened her fridge, ate her food, drank from her juice carton, and then he stood there, watching the hallway, waiting, listening. Sometimes he walked through the living room, just inches from her bedroom door. He never tried to hurt her, not directly. He just existed. In her space, without her knowing, he would disappear before dawn, back into the attic every night. For weeks. Jennifer never heard him come or go, until the night she forgot to turn the camera back on. She woke up and found muddy footprints in the kitchen and a cold glass of water half drunk on the counter. That was the night she called the police. They searched the attic and found a makeshift bed, blankets, food wrappers, a small flashlight, and a man, hiding behind the insulation. He had been living there for weeks, possibly months, watching her, listening, breathing in the silence of her home. He didn't scream, didn't resist. He just looked at her, like he knew her, like he had been part of her life. A quiet, dark peace. He was homeless, a drifter, mentally unstable. He had found her attic hatch unlocked one night and decided to stay. Jennifer moved out days later. She could never walk into that house again, not after knowing what had shared it with her. The sound of footsteps above her ceiling still haunted her sleep. She moved far away, changed her number, but something followed her. Not the man, not physically, but the fear, the knowledge. That home isn't always safe, that even when you're alone, you might not be. That some people don't knock. They sneak, and sometimes they never leave. She started locking everything, double-checking, triple-checking, but locks don't stop memories or nightmares. At night, she lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if it could happen again, wondering if it was happening again. One night she heard a creak in her new house, just a small one, near the attic. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. She knew the sound too well now. It was soft, deliberate, familiar. She didn't sleep that night. The next day, she called a contractor to seal her attic permanently. No hatch, no entry, no space for anyone or anything. But the fear remained, buried just beneath the surface. It didn't matter how far she moved, how many security systems she installed. Once you've been watched while you sleep, it never really leaves you. She tried to tell friends about it. Some believed her, most didn't. They thought it was exaggerated or imagined. They didn't see the footage. They didn't feel what she felt. They didn't wake up to footprints on clean tiles and that stare he gave her. Not angry, not crazed, just empty, like he belonged there, like he owned her. Silence. Jennifer kept the camera footage for a while, as a reminder, as proof. But one night she deleted it. She couldn't bear to see it anymore. Every frame felt like a violation. Every second showed her what she had never known. That horror doesn't knock. It creeps. It waits. It listens. And sometimes it lives in your attic. Weeks passed, then months. She began to rebuild her life. Slowly. Therapy helped. Friends helped. But still, sometimes at night, she'd hear things, or thought she heard things, and she would lie there, heart racing, eyes wide, ears straining, and every creak, every bump, brought back his face, the quiet invader, the watcher in the dark. He never hurt her, not physically, but trauma isn't measured in bruises. It's in the way she started sleeping with lights on, the way she avoided ceilings, the way she froze every time she heard something from above. Even a bird on the roof could send her into a spiral. That's what horror really is. Not monsters, not jump scares, but the slow, choking realization that your reality isn't yours alone, that someone else had claimed it, without your permission, without your knowledge, and for a while, without your escape. She became obsessed with checking her surroundings, every corner, every closet, every shadow. She avoided attics, never even looked at one again. Her new apartment didn't have an attic. That was the point. She searched listings obsessively, any mention of an attic, crawl space, or hidden room. Immediate number friends teased her for it, but she didn't laugh, because they didn't understand, because they hadn't lived it. Some nights, she'd get messages from strangers. "Was this your story?" they'd ask, linking news articles. It had happened to others too, in other cities, other homes. Other people had shared their space with shadows. Sometimes it was a stalker, sometimes a squatter, sometimes something worse. Jennifer realized something awful then. Her story wasn't rare, it was just rarely told. People are embarrassed to admit they missed the signs, ashamed to say they were watched, touched, haunted. But the truth is, it could happen to anyone. It has happened to many, and most of them never know, until it's far too late. After the incident, Jennifer became part of an online support group, Victims of Hidden Intruders. Yes, that's a thing. It was a dark corner of the internet where people shared their own tales, tales of men under beds, in walls, in crawl spaces. She wasn't alone in her fear, and somehow that made it worse, because it meant the world was full of people like him. People who watched silently, who didn't need to break in, who found their way inside and just stayed. She read a post once that chilled her to her bones. A woman in Ohio discovered a man had lived behind a false wall in her basement for over a year. He had journals. He had written about her daily routines, what she wore, what she watched. When she cried, it reminded Jennifer of her footage, of how he stared at her hallway, like he knew everything, like he was waiting. That stare still haunted her dreams, eyes wide open. But nothing behind them. Hollow, quiet, patient. She moved again after a year, not because of him, but because she needed a fresh start. Or so she told herself. The new place was modern. Bright. Open floor plan. No attic. No shadows. Still, the first night, she heard a creak, her breath caught. It was nothing, just the refrigerator cycling, but in her head, she saw him, bare feet, dirty shirt, cold eyes. The past doesn't always stay buried. Sometimes it lives in your ceiling, waiting for you to fall asleep. And even when you wake up, it never really leaves. Jennifer wrote about her experience anonymously. It went viral. Comments poured in. Some were supportive, others doubted her, but many shared their own horrors. I heard breathing once, one wrote, and I lived alone. Another said, I thought I was going crazy, until I found the hole cut in my wall. The world was darker than she ever realized, and somehow that made her feel a little safer. Because she wasn't crazy, because it wasn't just her, because horror is real, and often it's human. It wears skin, walks softly, sleeps just above your head. She started a podcast, shared stories. She never used her real name. She never showed her face, but she spoke with a voice that carried pain and power. Each story she read was like exorcising a ghost, each word a step away from the attic. But she never listened to her own episode, the one about him, because hearing it again might awaken something, might bring back the footsteps, the creaks, the glass of water on the counter, and the sound of silence, breathing with her in the dark. One day, years later, she received a package. No return address. Inside, a small rusted key and a note that read, "You forgot to lock the attic." She dropped the box, moved again, burned the note. But at night the fear returned. Was it a prank or a reminder? Was he out, or had he never really left? Some say horror is a moment, a scream, a scare, a shock. But Jennifer knew better. Horror is a whisper, presence, a man in the attic who never made a sound. The silent caller from inside the house.
It was the kind of job teenagers hoped for. Babysitting, easy money, a night in a quiet house. Jenny had done it dozens of times before. The Nichols family was friendly, generous, always paid well. She was 16, independent, level-headed. The Nichols' house sat near the edge of town. Older, but cozy. That Saturday evening, it rained. Not a heavy downpour, just a soft, steady tap against the windows. Jenny arrived at 7:15. Umbrella in one hand, overnight bag in the other. Mr. and Mrs. Nichols greeted her at the door. They looked happy. Dressed up for their dinner date. Kids are upstairs, Mrs. Nichols smiled. Tucked in already. We won't be back too late, added Mr. Nichols. Jenny nodded. No problem at all. She stepped inside. The house was warm. She'd babysat here 3 times before. Always uneventful. The kids, Sarah and Tommy, were sweet. Jenny said goodnight to the parents and watched their car pull away. The street outside was still. Leaves rustled in the breeze. Inside, it was just Jenny and the children. She made herself comfortable. Turned on the TV. Found a black and white horror movie. Poured a glass of soda. Pulled the knit blanket off the back of the couch. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only other sound. For a while, everything was normal. She checked her phone, sent a few texts. The kids were quiet upstairs. The first call came at 8:42. She didn't recognize the number, but she answered anyway. Hello? Silence. Hello, she repeated. Click. She frowned. Wrong number, probably. 10 minutes passed. Another call. Same number. Same silence. Then, A click. A chill crawled up her spine. This time she muted the TV. Listened. The house was so quiet, it felt unnatural. She checked the door. Still locked. Every window closed. At 9:07, the phone rang again. She hesitated, then picked up. A voice. Male. Soft. "You should check on the children." Jenny blinked. "Who is this?" No answer. Click. She stood still for several seconds, then slowly climbed the stairs. The hallway was dimly lit by a nightlight. She peeked into the children's room. Both kids were sound asleep. Nothing seemed out of place. She crept back down, heart beating a little faster. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't answer, but the calls kept coming. 3, 4, 5 times, each one with silence. Until the 6th, she answered, voice shaking. "Stop calling or I'm calling the police." The voice was calm, cold. "I can see you." Jenny dropped the phone. It hit the hardwood with a thud. She backed toward the front door. Her hands trembled as she tried to unlock it, but she stopped. The chanta. Kids. She couldn't leave them. She snatched the phone again, dialed 911. Her voice trembled as she spoke. The dispatcher kept her calm, asked where she was, asked what was happening. She explained everything. The silence. The voice. The message. He told her to stay on the line. "We'll trace the call," he said. Jenny paced the living room, eyes darting to every shadow. The rain outside intensified. She thought she saw movement near the back window, but it was just a tree branch swaying. 5 minutes passed. Then the dispatcher said it. Something Jenny would never forget. "Ma'am, the call is coming from inside the house." She couldn't speak. Her voice caught in her throat. Inside the house? No, that couldn't be. She turned slowly, looked toward the stairs. The shadows shifted. She grabbed the cordless phone, bolted for the front door, fumbled with the lock. Finally yanked it open. Cold air rushed in. She sprinted into the rain, across the street, to the Hendersons' porch. She banged on the door. Mr. Henderson answered, confused. Then he saw her face, pale, drenched, terrified. She stumbled inside. Police arrived minutes later, guns drawn. They searched the Nichols house, found no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, but upstairs, in the hallway closet, a small crawl space, just large enough for someone to hide in. Inside, they found a disposable cell phone and a single pillow, impressions in the carpet. Someone had been there. For how long? They couldn't tell. The children were still asleep, unharmed. But the feeling in the house had changed. It was no longer a home. It was a crime scene, a story that would haunt the town. Police never caught the caller. Jenny's story spread. Local news. Then regional. Then the internet. Urban legends grew from it. They changed the names. Changed the ending. But the bones were the same. A girl. A phone call. A voice from inside. Jenny never spoke publicly. Not after that night. She changed her number, changed her school, changed her name. But the voice stayed with her. That calm, cold whisper. "You should check on the children." And sometimes, late at night, she still does.
The Dyatlov Pass Incident.
It's one of the most haunting unsolved mysteries of the 20th century. 9 hikers, all young, all experienced, led by Igor Dyatlov. They set off into the Ural Mountains in January of 1959. They never came back. Weeks later, a search party found their tent. It had been cut open from the inside. The hikers had fled barefoot into sub-zero temperatures. Some were nearly naked. Their bodies were scattered across the snow, frozen in impossible positions. Some had crushed skulls. Others had shattered ribs. One was missing her tongue, and To this day, no one knows why. Some blame an avalanche. Others say it was military testing. But there are darker theories, stranger ones that hint at something not entirely human. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see what they saw and understand why they ran. It began with preparation. 9 friends from the Ural Polytechnical Institute. They were young, passionate, and hardened by the cold. Their goal was to reach Otorten, a mountain whose name meant, "Don't go there." But they went. For adventure. For glory. For the thrill. The expedition began smoothly. They kept journals, took photos, laughed, sang, hiked through wind and snow, until February the 1st. That night, something changed. They pitched their tent on a slope near Kolatsiakal, Mountain of the Dead. Locals warned them not to go. But the hikers didn't believe in curses. They believed in science, in logic, in maps and compasses. What they didn't expect was the darkness, not just of night, but of something ancient, something watching. The wind howled louder that night. The temperature dropped below 30 degrees 6. Inside the tent, they huddled for warmth. Someone wrote in a journal, another strummed a guitar. But outside, something moved. No one saw it, but someone heard it. A faint sound, low, like a growl carried by the wind. They unzipped the flap, shone a flashlight into the darkness, saw only snow, only shadows. But the air felt wrong, heavy, electric. The dogs barked, then whined, then fell silent. No one knows what happened next, but hours later, they were all gone, scattered across the white. The tent was found slashed from the inside, as if they had to escape something, fast, barefoot, half-dressed. Some ran toward the trees, others crawled. They left behind boots, coats, gloves, everything that would keep them alive. 2 bodies were found under a cedar tree, frozen, curled together. A fire had been lit, but only branches remained. Their hands were raw, burned, torn, as if they tried to climb the tree, to escape something. 3 more bodies were found between the tree and the tent, crawling back or fleeing again. Then came the most terrifying discovery. 4 bodies in a ravine. Their injuries were horrific. One had her eyes missing, her tongue gone. Another had fractured ribs, as if crushed by force, not by a fall, but by something. With intent, the official cause of death, hypothermia. But how does cold remove a tongue? How does it crush a skull without external trauma? How does it explain the orange tint to their skin, the strange radiation found on their clothing? Years later, the theories still come. Avalanche, infrasound, military tests, escape from secret experiments, alien contact, Yeti. Attack. But no theory explains everything. The precise cuts, the silent panic, the orderly chaos, and the way. They seem to have been running not from nature, but from something unnatural. One hiker wrote in his journal, "Now we know snowmen exist." Was it a joke or a warning? The locals had stories of strange lights in the sky, of glowing orbs, of whispers in the wind, of creatures that stalked the mountains and took what they pleased. But the Soviet Union silenced questions, closed the files, classified the evidence, and buried the truth. The families were told to forget, to accept that it was the cold, that it was an accident. But how can you forget a daughter with no eyes, a son with shattered ribs? How do you explain the burned branches, the frantic claw marks on bark, the torn tent? How do you explain the fear frozen in their final expressions, and the echo that still haunts the mountain? What did they see, and why did it silence them forever? Maybe it wasn't one thing. Maybe it was many, a convergence of forces, the mountain's curse, the echo of ancient rituals, the fury of disturbed ground, or maybe it's still there, waiting, watching, buried in snow, hidden by time, and perhaps not entirely done. Some believe the answer lies in sound, infrasound, a natural phenomenon caused by wind passing over the mountain. It creates a frequency too low to hear, but powerful enough to induce panic. Hallucinations. Terror. Could it have driven them mad? Could fear have made them flee into the cold, tearing through the tent, running blindly from the ghosts in their minds? Maybe. But then, what about the injuries? What about the eyes, the radiation? Infrasound doesn't crush bones. It doesn't silence animals. It doesn't leave claw marks on trees. Others say it was military, that the hikers saw something they shouldn't have, witnessed a test, a weapon, an experiment, and were silenced. 1. Theory claims they died under parachute mines, that the explosion caused internal damage, without leaving surface wounds. But why the slashed tent? Why the missing tongue? Why the fear? Some survivors, searchers who came later, spoke of strange lights, orange spheres hovering above the mountain, silent, pulsing, and then gone. One rescue worker refused to return. He claimed he heard a voice, calling from the trees, a voice that said his name. That knew things about his childhood no one could have known. He never went near Dyatlov Pass again, and what about the photos? The last frame on one of the cameras shows a blurry orb, a glowing light in the distance. Not a flashlight, not a flare. Something else. Something watching. The families demanded answers. But the government closed the case. Said it was a compelling, natural force. What does that even mean? No one ever explained. No one ever reopened the files until decades later. When private researchers hiked to the site, they found nothing new, except one night, one of them heard something, a sound like breathing coming from under the snow. He left the mountain and never returned. Others claimed their compasses spun in circles. Electronics died. Footsteps appeared in fresh snow. But no one was there. Even today, hikers feel uneasy at Dyatlov Pass. They speak of nightmares, of being watched, of whispering winds that carry more than just air. Some leave offerings at the site, candles, photographs, prayers, as if trying to appease whatever remains or warn it to. Stay silent, but the mountain never forgets, and neither does the wind. Igor Dyatlov's name is carved into the pass now, a memorial, a warning, and a question. What really happened that night? Was it the elements or the unknown? Do spirits still roam there, or something older, something ancient, that woke when the hikers set foot on cursed ground? Ask yourself, why were their last moments so frantic? Why were their tracks straight at first, then chaotic? Why did some flee half-dressed? And others seem to return. Were they trying to save one another, or being pulled apart by something unseen? Maybe the mountain demanded a price, and it claimed 9 souls that night. Some say the 10th was spared, Yuri Yudin, the only one who turned back due to illness. He never forgave himself, and he never stopped wondering what really happened to his friends. He visited the site decades later, fell to his knees, and whispered, "I'm sorry." He died years later, still haunted, still dreaming of a tent in the snow, still seeing the flashlight beam cut through the trees, and the shadows that danced just beyond its reach. So we ask you now, what do you think happened? An accident, a conspiracy, or something supernatural? Leave a comment, because until someone finds the truth, the Dyatlov Pass remains open, not just in the mountains, but in our imaginations, a place where fear sleeps beneath the snow and wakes when the wind howls. Just right.
The real haunting of the Perron family.
It started with a whisper, a low murmur behind the walls, the kind of sound you blame on pipes or the wind. But there was no wind that night, just silence and the whispering. April Perron was the first to hear it. She stood at the top of the stairs, listening, straining, too afraid to move, too curious to walk away. She was only 5 years old, but she knew what fear felt like, and this was it. The house was cold, colder than usual. The fire in the hearth had gone out. Even the embers seemed afraid to burn. She backed away, step by step, down the hall, toward the bedroom. The shadows moved with her, like they were following, like they were watching. She closed the door, but the whispering didn't stop. It was inside now, inside the room, inside her. The house had welcomed the Perrons just days earlier, a sprawling, colonial farmhouse in the countryside of Rhode Island. 14 rooms, stone foundation, wooden beams, over 2 centuries old. It looked like something out of a painting. Quiet, private, perfect. Roger and Carolyn Perron thought they had found paradise. Place to raise their 5 daughters, Andrea, Nancy, Christine, Cindy, and little April. But the house had been waiting, not for a family, for victims. The first week, it was the smell, like rotting meat, sometimes sulfur. It would come and go, choking one room, then disappearing the next. Then the doors began to open on their own and slam shut. Hard. Pictures fell from walls, shadows passed in corners. The children began to whisper among themselves. "Did you see her? She was standing right there." "Don't go upstairs alone." Carolyn started waking with bruises, round dot purple, like fingers had gripped her in the night. She told Roger. He said she was dreaming, but she wasn't sleeping, not anymore. The nights were full of footsteps, running down hallways, dragging sounds across the floor, whispers behind the walls, and then the crying. Always at 3:07 a.m., a woman sobbing, somewhere deep within the house. Carolyn searched, room by room. Nothing. Until one night she found April, sitting in the parlor, talking to someone who wasn't there. "There's a lady," April said. She says this used to be her house." Carolyn froze. "Where is she now?" April pointed behind her. "There," but there was no one. Not that Carolyn could see. Still, she felt it. The air shifted, heavy, electric. She grabbed April and ran. The other girls began to change. Cindy wouldn't sleep in her room. Christine refused to be left alone. Andrea started locking her door at night. Nancy stopped speaking for days. At a time, the family was unraveling, the house was feeding, and deep in the basement, something was waking. Carolyn went down there once, just once. The light bulb shattered overhead. The darkness swallowed her, and something whispered her name. She ran up the stairs, tripped, felt hands on her back. But no one was there. That night she dreamed of fire, of blood on the walls, of a woman screaming her name, Bathsheba. The name came to her like a curse. It echoed through her mind, like it had always been there. The children said it too. "She doesn't like you, Mommy. She wants you gone. She said you stole her babies." Carolyn tried to stay strong, tried to protect them, but every day the house took more. Her health, her strength, her mind. One night, Roger found her standing outside in the snow, barefoot, in a nightgown, whispering to the window, to something looking back. He dragged her inside. She didn't remember any of it. Just the cold, just the eyes, watching from the second floor. The family stopped inviting people over. They couldn't explain the bruises, the furniture that moved, the stench, the voices. They were alone with whatever lived in that house, and it wasn't just one spirit. It was many. Some cried, some screamed, some laughed, and one hated Carolyn, hated the children, hated the living. They tried to leave, but something stopped them every time they packed. Someone got hurt, cut, burned, pushed down the stairs. The house was holding them, and they didn't know why. Not yet, but they would. They would soon learn the house's secret, and it would change them forever. Carolyn began researching old records town, archives, death certificates. She discovered the house had a history of tragedy, so many deaths, suicides, hangings, children that drowned. One woman poisoned her baby. Her name was Bathsheba Sherman. She lived there in the mid-1800s. Rumors said she was a witch, that she sacrificed her infant to Satan, that she cursed the land. She was buried in a nearby cemetery, but her spirit never rested. Carolyn became obsessed. The more she read, the worse things got. The air in the house felt thick, like breathing through water. Doors opened to brick walls. Mirrors reflected things that weren't there. Whispers turned into voices. Voices turned into screams. Then, something entered her. Late, one night, the girls heard a crash, came running, found Carolyn on the floor, bleeding, convulsing. Her eyes rolled back. She spoke in a language none of them knew. Her voice was deep, wrong, not her own. Roger called for help. But who do you call when the devil moves into your house? Eventually, they called a priest. He refused to enter. He stood on the porch, praying and crying. They called a medium. She fainted the moment she stepped inside. They called the Warrens, Ed and Lorraine. Well known. In the paranormal world, they arrived quietly. No cameras, no fanfare, just crosses and rosaries. And courage. Lorraine stepped into the kitchen. She gasped. She said, "Something is here, and it knows us now." The investigation began. They interviewed the family, witnessed the events, recorded sounds. They heard voices say, "Get out," heard banging in the walls, scratching in the ceilings, smelled the sulfur, felt the fear. Lorraine saw Bathsheba standing behind Carolyn, smiling, waiting. They set up for a séance, to make contact, to cleanse the house. The girls gathered around. Roger hesitated, but agreed. The séance began with prayers, candles, chanting. Then the table shook. The floor vibrated. Carolyn screamed. Her chair lifted off the ground, then slammed into the wall. She howled. She cursed. Her body contorted. Her mouth foamed. She vomited black bile. "The bye," girls cried. Roger lunged to stop it. Lorraine shouted, "Don't break the circle!" But it was too late. Carolyn collapsed, eyes closed, face pale, chest barely rising. They carried her to bed. She slept for 2 days. When she woke, she remembered nothing. The Warrens told Roger, "This house needs to be exorcised." But the church refused. There was no official approval. Too many cases, too little proof. They were on their own. The Warrens returned many times. Each time the house got darker. Each time it fought harder. One day, Cindy disappeared. They searched the house for hours, calling her name, crying. They found her in the crawl space, unconscious. Her skin was cold. She whispered, "She showed me where they sleep." She wouldn't say more. Christine tried to run away, barefoot, in the snow. She said, "The voices won't stop." Roger grabbed her just in time. Nancy began cutting herself, said it helped quiet the pain. Andrea stopped eating. She said the food was spoiled, said they were poisoning them. The family was breaking. Carolyn begged Roger, "We have to leave." But they had nowhere to go. No money, no buyers for a cursed house. They were trapped, prisoners of Bathsheba. The final straw came one stormy night. Thunder shook the windows. Lightning lit up the hallway. Carolyn was dragged from her bed, screaming, invisible. Hands pulling her, down the stairs, into the basement. The girls chased after. Roger was gone that night, working. They watched helplessly as their mother was pulled through the floorboards. The Warrens arrived minutes later, called in a priest, unofficial, unauthorized, but willing. He blessed the house. Holy water burned on the walls. Crosses flew across the room. A scream echoed from the basement, so loud it shattered glass. Then silence. The house grew still. The air felt lighter. Carolyn was found lying on the basement floor, breathing alive. She opened her eyes and wept. For the first time in months, she felt free. The Warrens warned, "It's not over, but it's weakened." Over the next year, the house grew quieter, less violent. The bruises faded. The shadows moved on. Eventually, they sold the house, moved far away. But the memories stayed. The fear stayed. And sometimes, they swear, they still hear her, Bathsheba, whispering, waiting, watching. Andrea later wrote a book, told their story. Many called it fiction, but the Perrons know better. They lived it. They survived it. And if you visit that house today, some say it still breathes, still groans, still remembers. Would you step inside? Would you spend one night in the dark? And if you did, would you ever come back out? Because some houses are not just homes. They're traps, they're graves, and they never forget your name.
The unsolved disappearance of Elisa Lamb.
She checked in, but she never checked out. Elisa Lamb was 21 years old, a student, a dreamer, a girl who wanted to see the world. She came to Los Angeles alone. January 2013, bright-eyed, hopeful. She booked a room at the Cecil Hotel, a strange choice, an old building with a dark past. They gave her room 412. She smiled, thanked the front desk, wheeled her luggage into the elevator, and vanished. 19 days later, they found her, floating in the water tank on the hotel roof, naked, dead, her clothes nearby, but no explanation, no signs of trauma, no drugs in her system, just a girl who went missing, and then showed up where no one should have been able to go. This is the story of Elisa Lamb and the questions that refused to die. She kept a blog. She wrote about her struggles, her hopes, her fears. She talked about depression and the weight of expectation, but also the beauty she saw in the world. She wanted connection, to feel less alone. The Cecil wasn't her first stop. She'd been to San Diego, posted photos from the zoo, wrote about strangers she'd met. But when she arrived in LA, something changed. She stopped writing, stopped calling home. Her parents grew worried. They tried to reach her, but the phone just rang. Days passed, then weeks. Guests at the Cecil began to complain about the water. It tasted strange. It was dark, tinged, metallic. Pressure dropped. Eventually, a maintenance worker climbed to the roof, opened the tank, and screamed. Inside was Elisa, lifeless, alone, and no one could explain how she got there. The door to the roof was locked, alarmed. Staff said only employees had access. The tanks were heavy, tall, with no ladders, no steps. She would have needed help or superhuman effort. The police released elevator footage, hoping for answers. Instead, it raised more questions. The video showed Elisa inside the elevator, acting strangely. She pressed all the buttons, peered outside, stepped out, then back in, then out again. She waved. Her arms made strange gestures, as if hiding or communicating with something unseen. Then she vanished. The doors closed, and she was gone. Some say it was mental illness, that she was hallucinating. She was bipolar. Her record showed that, but her toxicology report was clean. She wasn't on drugs. Others say it was suicide. That she climbed up herself, somehow. But how did she get on the roof? How did she lift the tank lid and remove her clothes? And why? Then there are darker theories. Ones the hotel won't talk about. That the Cecil is cursed. That something lives there. Something that's taken others before. The Night Stalker stayed there. So did another serial killer. People jumped from windows, died in hallways. Rooms were soaked in death. Could Elisa have been drawn in by whatever haunts those walls? Some say the elevator game, a ritual from Korea. Press the buttons in a certain order. A woman enters. Don't look at her. Don't speak, or she'll take you. Did Elisa play it? Was she testing something she didn't understand? The footage feels like it. The timing, the behavior, everything matches. And what about the lid? The worker said it was closed, tight, but the police said it was open. Which one is true? Why the contradiction? Why the silence? Why the missing footage? The camera glitches. The minute that skips. What happened in that missing time? Did someone follow her? Someone real or not? The truth is, no one knows. No security saw her go up. No alarms were tripped. And yet, she was found. Floating. Alone. In the dark. They ruled it accidental. Closed the case. Moved on. But the internet didn't. Forget. People still search, still analyze, still theorize. Some say she was murdered. Others say she was possessed. Some believe she never really left the elevator. That something took her. That she crossed into something else and never came back. A hotel with 100 stories and 1,000 screams, where shadows whisper in stairwells and water runs red. Elisa Lam. A name etched into mystery. A girl with a story no one can finish. So we leave it to you. What do you believe? A breakdown, a crime, or something worse? Something not from here. That waits in hotels, in old elevators, and dark water tanks. Because sometimes the scariest part is not what we see, but what we never will.
The Exorcism of Annalisa Michel.
She was 16 when it began, a whisper in the night, a shadow in the corner, an unease she couldn't explain. Her name was Annalisa Michel. She lived in a small town in Bavaria, a devout Catholic family. Hard-working, quiet, normal, until the voices came. At first they were faint, distant, calling her name. Then they grew louder, angrier, demanding. She saw faces, twisted, grotesque. They mocked her prayers. She begged God for help. But the silence was unbearable. She began to scream at night, convulsed in her sleep. Her body stiffened. Her parents thought it was epilepsy. Doctors agreed. She was prescribed medication. It helped for a while. Then it didn't. She began to see demonic faces everywhere, in mirrors, in crowds, even in her family. She said she was cursed. She refused to eat. The voices told her she didn't deserve food, that she was damned, beyond salvation. Her body weakened. Her eyes grew sunken, but her strength was terrifying. 6 men couldn't hold her down. She spoke languages she never learned. Latin, Aramaic, ancient tongues. Her parents turned back to the church. Desperate, terrified, they found a priest, then another. Finally, 2 agreed. Father Arnold Renz and Father Ernst Alt. The church gave permission. They began the exorcisms, 67 in total. Over 10 months, they recorded many. The tapes still exist. Annalisa growls, screams, begging, pleading, voices not her own, sometimes several at once. She said she was possessed by Judas, by Nero, by Hitler, by Lucifer himself. She cursed the priests, mocked them, laughed as crosses shattered. She refused holy water, foamed at the mouth, tore her clothes, ate insects, bit her own flesh. Her knees bled from constant genuflecting. She said it was penance for the sins of the world. Her mother wept. Her father prayed. The priests kept going, even when she begged them to stop. They said it was the demon speaking, that they had to finish, to save her soul. Neighbors heard the screams, day and night, but no one called the police. In July 1976, she died. She weighed 68 pounds. Her body broken, her spirit gone. They buried her in a white coffin. Thousands came. Some said she was a saint. Others said she was abused. The state filed charges. The parents, the priests, all were tried for negligent homicide. The court played the tapes. Jurors cried. Doctors testified, said she was mentally ill. That medication might have saved her. The defense claimed otherwise, that what happened wasn't medical. It was spiritual. The priests said they saw evil, felt it, fought it, but lost. The jury found them guilty. 6 months suspended sentence, 3 years probation, a slap on the wrist. But the damage was eternal. Annalise became legend, a martyr to some, a victim to others. The tapes spread online. People heard the voices, felt chills. The house still stands. Visitors say it feels wrong. The room where she died remains untouched, as if waiting. Her grave draws pilgrims. They leave rosaries, photos, prayers, asking for her intercession or her forgiveness. This is not just a horror story. It's a question. Was she sick or possessed? Was it madness or a war for her soul? Only Annalise knows, and she's not speaking anymore. But not everyone believed. Some doctors still insisted it was a psychotic break, schizophrenia, temporal lobe epilepsy, catatonic depression. The symptoms matched: auditory hallucinations, delusions, self-harm. They said the exorcisms reinforced her condition, fed the fantasy, gave the voices power, but the priests disagreed. They said it wasn't fantasy, it was fury, real, tangible, ancient. Father Alt kept a journal, detailed every session. He wrote that the room would change, grow colder, smell of sulfur. He claimed the candles wouldn't stay lit, that crosses would flip upside down. He said he saw her levitate, only for seconds, but he swore it was real. The tapes they recorded weren't staged. Annalise's voice changed. She'd growl, then scream, then chant prayers backward, in Latin, even though she never studied it. Sometimes her voice would split. 2, 3, talking over each other, one praising Christ, the other blaspheming. It shook the priests to their core. They'd been trained to detect hoaxes, and this wasn't one. One night they said the walls bled. Brown streaks ran from the corners, like something alive was weeping. Elisa said the demons didn't just torment her. They hid inside her, laughed at her, mocked her prayers. She wrote messages at night, in languages she couldn't read, pages filled with symbols, circles, eyes, horns. Her behavior grew more erratic. She would kneel and pray for hours, without moving, until her knees bled. She said if she stopped, they'd scream. They'd take someone else. She didn't want her sisters to suffer, so she offered herself. She believed it was her mission, her punishment, her calling. Her mother began fasting with her, trying to share the burden, trying to understand. But the house groaned with every session. Objects moved, glass shattered, clocks stopped. The air became heavy, like something ancient sat on their shoulders, watching, waiting. The priests read from the Roman ritual over and over. The demons named themselves, each one proud, each one claiming territory. One said he was Cain, another said he was Lucifer. Annalise's face contorted, her spine bent unnaturally, her pupils dilated until her eyes turned black. She begged them to stop, then laughed at them seconds later. They never knew who they were talking to, the girl or the thing inside her. Sometimes she cried and thanked them, said she could feel it weakening. Then she'd scream and curse, said she'd never leave, that they all belonged to her now, that they would burn. The priests were exhausted, emotionally, spiritually. They questioned themselves. Were they helping or harming? Was it mercy or madness? But they kept going. They had to, because no one else believed. The doctors had given up, said she was a lost cause. But the priests saw a soul, trapped, tortured, crying for help. They believed she was chosen, that she was fighting for something bigger. War beyond flesh, and they were soldiers in it. But soldiers break, and Elisa was breaking. Her skin tore easily, her bones ached. She whispered confessions to herself, pages and pages of guilt, for things she never did. She felt unclean, unworthy. She refused food, refused water. Her body withered, her soul. They weren't sure. They tried one final exorcism, a midnight ritual, candles lit, holy water ready, the Bible shaking in their hands. They prayed louder than ever. She screamed louder still. Then suddenly, silence. Elisa collapsed and whispered, "It is finished." Those were her last words. She died the next day, in her bed, clutching a crucifix, eyes wide open, a faint smile on her lips. They say she looked peaceful. Finally. But the questions didn't stop. They only multiplied. Was it mental illness, or possession, a medical failure, or spiritual warfare? Why didn't the medication work? Why didn't the hospital intervene? Was it abuse or devotion, her parents believed, to their last breath? So did the priests, but others weren't so sure. The church became silent, publicly distanced itself, privately. Many believed. The case became legend. The media called it medieval. But some who listened to the tapes said otherwise. They heard something they couldn't explain, something not human, something cold, ancient, and angry. Elisa's grave became sacred. Site of pilgrimage, a warning and a question. How far would you go to save a soul? They buried her under a cloudy sky. Her coffin was white, plain, unadorned. But people came from all over, not just family, not just friends, strangers, pilgrims, believers, skeptics. They left flowers, crosses, tears. Some prayed for her, some prayed to her. They said her suffering was not in vain, that she fought evil for the sake of others, that she died a martyr, but others weren't so sure. The medical community was furious. They called it criminal. Failure of science, a failure of care. They said the priests exploited her, that her parents were blind, that her death was preventable. The court case that followed shook Germany. It became a national obsession. Every headline carried her name. Trial lasted months. Experts were brought in, psychiatrists, neurologists, theologians. Some said it was epilepsy. Others claimed it was psychosis, but no one could explain the voices, the languages, the strength, the fear that spread through that home. One doctor whispered to a reporter, "I'm not a religious man, but something happened there." The court ruled it negligence. The priests were sentenced, suspended terms, probation, but no prison, because the judge believed they meant well, that they truly believed. Elisa's parents never forgave the world. They held on to their truth. Their daughter was chosen, possessed, and abandoned by a church too afraid to speak. The Vatican remained quiet. Unofficial whispers spread through corridors. Some bishops said she had the stigmata, marks on her hands, her feet, bleeding from wounds that came from nowhere. They called her blessed. Others called her broken. Hollywood came calling. They made a film, changed the name, changed the ending, but the bones were the same. The tapes were real, the screams were real, and the debate still alive. Was she mentally ill or spiritually invaded? Was she failed by science or martyred by faith? Some say possession is just a metaphor for trauma, for isolation, for untreated wounds. But others say evil is real, and it waits, it watches, for the lost, for the vulnerable, for the devout. It enters through cracks and never leaves without a fight. Elisa became more than a name. She became a symbol, a mirror, to our greatest fears. What if medicine fails? What if prayer doesn't work? What if there's something darker in the shadows, waiting to be believed? The recordings are still online. You can hear them, but beware. They aren't easy to forget. One priest said he still dreams of her voice, her eyes. Sometimes he hears her whisper, "I'm still fighting." Some believe she visits, her spirit, searching for justice, for peace, for truth. Her grave is quiet now, but visitors still come. They kneel, they cry, they ask questions. No one has answers, because maybe there are none. Maybe her death was a tragedy, or a revelation, a clash of belief systems, of faith versus reason, light versus darkness. Annalise Michel, born in faith, died in torment, immortalized in fear. You've heard the story, now you must decide. Was she a victim of neglect? Or a soldier in a war we can't see, a girl lost in madness, or a martyr fighting evil? Because in the end, the scariest part isn't what happened. It's that it could happen again. To anyone. Anywhere. Even you. Even now. When you close your eyes and hear that whisper, calling your name.